Hare Krishna. So, welcome everyone to this wonderful session of Bhagavad Gita reading. We were reading chapter number 3. I think we finished up till Sloka 37. So, 38 and 39 verses we will see today. And yes, we will read them and we will try to analyze what Srila Prabhupada is saying in the purport, and we will do some discussions. But before that, I would like to offer some pranam mantras. So those who know can repeat after me. Those who don't, just try to listen very intently, because listening is also very, very purifying. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahayam Dadati Swapadantikam. Vandeham Shri Gururo Shri Utapad Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Satvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenbandhu Jagatpate Gopesh Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिय वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। नमो महावदन्याय कृष्णप्रेमप्रदायते कृष्णाय कृष्णचैतन्यनामिने गौरत्विषे नमः। नमो ओं विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्तस्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषा शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देश तारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तविंद हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्णा हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे मुखं करोति वाचालं पंगुं लंघते गिरि यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे श्रीगुरुं दीनतारिणं परमानन्दमाधवं श्रीचैतन्यमीश्वरम् हरि ओम तत्सत Okay, so a quick recap of what we had been discussing so far. Okay, so in the last session we saw that Sri Krishna answered a very important question, put forward by Arjun. And what was that question? Arjun wanted to know that even if a living entity, okay, is following all the rules and regulations which are prescribed in the scriptures, okay, he is performing all the prescribed duties which are mentioned in the scriptures, okay, still at some point, okay, uh, some point or the other, basically what happens that unwillingly, okay, they end up committing some sinful actions, okay. uh, some sinful actions they end up committing as if it is being done by force, okay, someone is forcing them to perform such activities or such actions. And Arjun wanted to know from Sri Krishna that what is that invisible force, okay, which actually forces a living entity to perform sinful actions. And to this Lord Sri Krishna answered that it is lust only, O Arjun, okay, which is born out of contact of material mode of passion. Okay, so we also saw three modes of material nature. I gave an overview, right? That mode of goodness, which is satogun, mode of passion, which is rajogun, and mode of ignorance, which is tamogun, right? And we also understood that this lust which Sri Krishna is talking about is born out of the material mode of passion, which is rajogun, okay, and it is later transformed into wrath or anger, okay, if it is not satisfied. And this anger is the all devouring enemy of the entire world. So this is what Shri Krishna said, okay, in the last few verses we saw. All these discussions were happening. And we also saw that we all, okay, I mean all the living entities which are here, okay, they are who are trapped in this material world, we all are lusty. uh, those who want to understand this concept in a better way, please go back and go through the previous verse, okay, verse number 37, 36, 37, basically, which we discussed, okay. And everything will be clear after that. And we also saw how both lust and anger can be dovetailed in the service of Sri Krishna. Okay, so as Krishna conscious people, our aim should be to dovetail all our activities, including the lust and anger, in the service of Krishna, and then and only then, we can have some hope of breaking the cycle of birth and death and going back home, back to Sri Krishna. Okay. So in this verse number 38, we will see that Lord Sri Krishna explains further, okay, the different degrees of lust. Okay. So in general, the degrees of lust can be classified into three categories. Okay. First is the shallow lust, second is deep lust, and third is very deep lust. Okay. So we will see what these three categories are, and very nicely with different analogies, Sri Krishna is actually explaining this, and in the purport of Srila Prabhupada also it has been explained very beautifully. So we will try to understand them. Okay. So first let's read the verse and then we will try to break it down. Okay, I'll share my screen now. Then we will read. Okay. So Bhagavad Gita, verse number 38, chapter number 3, goes like this. धूमेनाव्रियते वह्निर्यथा दर्शो मलेन च यथोल्बेनावृतो गर्भस्तथा तेदेनमावृतम्. Once more. धूमेनाव्रियते वह्निर्यथा दर्शो मलेन च यथोल्बेनावृतो गर्भस्तथा तेदेनमावृतम्. Translation goes like this. As fire is covered by smoke, as a mirror is covered by dust, or as the embryo is covered by the womb, the living entity is similarly covered by different degrees of this lust. Okay. So yes, so very nice analogy Lord Sri Krishna is giving. Fire covered by smoke, mirror covered by dust, and embryo covered by womb. And as I mentioned earlier, that there are three different degrees of lust, okay, which we will see. That is the shallow lust, deep lust, and very deep lust. Okay. So this is what Lord Sri Krishna is saying. So first let's try to focus on some of the keywords of this shloka, try to understand them word by word, and then we will try to analyze this verse. Okay. So dhumena means the smoke. Okay. So we have seen fire covered by smoke. So dhumena means smoke, and vanir, that means fire. Okay. Avrite means it is covered. Okay. So this vani or fire is covered by dhumena, which is the smoke. Okay. And then yatha means just as, adarsha means mirror, and malena means dirt. Okay. So like the mirror is covered by dust, so similarly, that is one degree of lust which Sri Krishna is talking about. Okay. So living entity is covered by certain degree of lust. Okay. Which type of lust it is, which degree of lust it is, we will see a little later. Okay. uh, Also, there is another analogy which says yatha, just as, ulbena. Ulbena means womb, the womb, and garbha means embryo, and avrita, that means covered. So embryo is covered by what? Ulbena, that means the womb. Okay. So first one, fire covered by smoke, second, mirror covered by dust, and third, embryo covered by womb. These are the three analogies Lord Sri Krishna uses to depict the three degrees of lust within a living entity. Okay. What are the three degrees of lust? Shallow lust, deep lust, and very deep lust. Okay. Okay. Now, tatha tatha tenedam avritam. That means living entities are covered by different degrees of lust, which we have seen already. Okay. Now let's know, or rather, let's analyze. Okay, that these different degrees of lust, which are basically given to us by Shri Krishna. Okay. But before we proceed to understand the different degrees of lust, we first need to understand the nature of the spirit soul. Okay, little bit about spirit soul we will try to understand. Okay, so first of all, okay, in the earlier verses, especially in chapter number 2, okay, we have seen the size of the spirit soul is very accurately given in the Bhagavad Gita. Okay, and what is the size of the soul? If anyone can recall, it is 1 by 10,000th part of the tip of the hair. That means you take a hair, okay, cut off its tip, Now you what to say, break down or further cut down that tip into 10,000 parts. Okay, and then you take one such part, that is the size of the spirit soul. Okay, it's very very minute, very very tiny. It's so small, as a matter of fact, that even if it were something material, spirit soul is obviously spiritual in nature, so anyways we won't be, our material eyes won't be able to see it, right? But even if something is material, but if it is so small, 1/10,000th part of the tip of the hair, I think it will require a really, really powerful microscope to see that. I'm not even sure that even with that we will be able to see it or not. Okay. So you can just imagine the size of the spirit soul, and that just 1/10,000th part of that, spiritual spark, that we have within ourselves, and it makes the entire body function. Not just this human body, but every single form of life that you see on this planet. Okay, and every single type of life which is present on another other planets in all the other universes. Okay, this spirit soul is the driving force behind that. Okay, so you can just imagine how powerful it is. Just a tiny spark is just, creating consciousness in all the living entities. Yes. So living so we saw that the size of the spirit soul is very small, and it is very very difficult to see, very very difficult to perceive, but its presence can be perceived. Okay, its presence can be perceived by what? By the nature of the spirit soul, or by the symptom of that spirit soul. And what is the symptom of that spirit soul? Symptom of the spirit soul is consciousness. Okay, this is a very important point to understand. So please understand that although spirit soul is very small, okay, but it can be felt by its presence, and its presence can be felt by the consciousness in anything or any person, place, whatever. Okay, anything which is conscious, just understand that there is a driving force behind that consciousness, and that driving force is the spirit soul. Okay, so if the spirit soul is taken out of uh, any conscious entity, then that thing will become unconscious. Okay, so just this is how minute but how powerful the spirit soul is. Okay, so this is a symptom of the spirit soul. We saw the size is very small. We saw the symptom is that the symptom of the spirit soul is consciousness. Now there is another very we'll try to discuss about the nature of the spirit soul. And the nature of the spirit soul is very very active. By default it is very active. Okay, it just cannot remain idle. It needs some engagement or the other. Okay, and that is the reason why you see that in whichever entity this spiritual spark is present, this spirit soul is present, such entities are very active by nature. Okay, something or the other they are doing. Okay, and we have observed in our day-to-day lives also, like especially in the human form of life, people just cannot sit idle. Biggest example which I can think of was during the COVID times. Yes, when there was a lockdown all across the world, still people were, for first few weeks they were okay. Like 1 week they somehow stayed back at home due to fear or whatever. Okay, and then as the days passed, maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks, people started getting restless. Okay, they were actually, finding it really difficult to stay back at home, and desperately they wanted to get out by, making some excuse or the other. Yes, and in that process, some of them, eventually contacted COVID also. Okay, and government was very very strict at that time, regarding the movement of the people all around. Some rules and regulations were laid out, and lot of things were there. Okay, so but the what I wanted to convey here is that you just see that by nature the spirit soul is very active, and that active nature is basically, manifested in the uh, any living entity which is actually holding that spirit soul within them. Okay, so the spirit soul is by nature very active, and because of these symptoms, okay, consciousness and activity and activeness. Okay, uh, the spirit soul in the Vedic scriptures are sometimes compared to fire. Okay, spirit soul is sometimes compared to fire. Okay, it's just like fire has its, it continuously burns. It is always very active. So similarly, spirit soul is also compared to fire. Okay, and in this analogy, Lord Shri Krishna is speaking about um, lust, and how lust covers a living entity. And in the first analogy, what Sri Krishna is saying is that he is giving the analogy of basically a fire covered by smoke, a screen of smoke. Okay, so this lust is compared to the smoke screen. Okay, and the spirit soul is compared to the fire. Okay, and that fire is burning, and the smoke is actually covering the fire. So what Srila Prabhupada is saying in the purport is that when the lust is like a smoke covering the fire, okay, in this scenario, some living spark can be perceived. Okay, that means the source is there, the source of smoke is there, and that is the reason why the smoke is around. So some fire is there. People can perceive some little amount of light, little amount of heat can also be perceived. Okay, even though fire is covered by smoke, it is not fully visible. Yes, but at least we can see and perceive some amount of fire. Okay, so this stage is compared to slight exhibition of Krishna consciousness in a living entity. Okay, although the living entity is covered by lust, but with slight Krishna consciousness, we should be able to see little bit of that spiritual spark within them. Okay, so this is what Srila Prabhupada is mentioning in the purport. Okay, and this is exactly the state of the sadhakas like you and me, right? Like we are trying to, practice Krishna consciousness. We are trying to become Krishna conscious, okay, by performing our daily sadhana routine, by chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, morning programs that we are doing, right? So by this we are actually practicing little bit of Krishna consciousness, and it's just like a fire covered by smoke, but still that lust is there. So that spark people can see, that some amount of uh, uh, spark or some fire can be perceived, but still it is covered by smoke actually. Okay, so it can be said that the power fire covered by smoke is a shallow lust. Okay, so we saw that there are three degrees of lust: shallow lust, deep lust, and very deep lust, right? So fire covered by smoke is a shallow lust. Why? Because we can also see the fire, we can also see the smoke, we can perceive the fire. Okay, so I mean, fire is performing its function basically. Yes, it is not entirely covered, and it is not so much covered that it's not even able to perform its function. So that is why this is shallow lust. Okay. Similarly, coming to the second analogy is of the dust on the mirror. Okay. So what is the function of a mirror? Function of the mirror is to reflect the images. Yes. So when a mirror is covered by thick layer of dust, what will happen? Okay, we will not be able to see the image. Yes, so that means the function of the mirror is not performed properly. The mirror is not able to perform its function properly. Okay, but point to note there is that we are not able to see the image in the mirror. Okay, but the mirror is visible to us. Okay, mirror is not able to perform the function, but we are actually able to see the mirror. Okay, so this kind of thing is it's a little 1 degree higher than shallow lust. So this is known as a deep lust. Okay, that the function of the spirit soul is actually, what to say, uh, the spirit soul is not able to perform its function. That consciousness itself is not there in that spirit soul. Okay, the degree of lust is so much. So this is known as the deep lust. Okay, and coming to the third analogy, the embryo within the womb. So embryo is completely packed within the womb. Okay, neither the embryo is able to see us, see the outside world, nor we are able to see the embryo, at least directly. Okay, although there are indirect ways in the medical science, but then that also doesn't give us a clear picture of what's going on inside the womb, right? So we can just figure out that okay, something is there, something is moving, and all the doctors can figure out where are the hands and legs and whatever. But for a common man like me, like, it will be very difficult to figure out. There's no direct way to see the embryo in the womb. Similarly, the embryo also cannot see what is outside the womb in the outside world. Yes, so that means the living entity is completely covered by lust, completely covered, so much so that neither it is able to see anything around it, nor others are able to see it function. Okay, that means it is completely blocked out. Okay, the layer of lust is so thick or so, like dense, that it is completely shutting out the living entity. In It's almost unconscious actually, the living entity. Okay, so such a situation is known as very deep lust. Okay, so three categories of lust are there: shallow lust, compared to fire covered by smoke; Deep lust compared to dust on the mirror. Third is very deep lust. That is being compared by the analogy which is being given for this scenario is embryo in the womb. Okay. Now, when I say that the spirit soul becomes almost unconscious, in case of very deep lust, so unconscious is in terms of spiritually is like spiritually unconscious, or in terms of self-realization. Okay, such a living entity cannot perform functions of self-realization, and breaking the cycle of birth and death is simply out of question. Okay, even simple small levels of bhakti also they won't be able to perform. Okay, there is no hope for such living entities. Okay, and an example of such living entities are the trees and plants, okay, which are just rooted at one point. The consciousness level is very very low. Okay, we cannot hope that a plant will perform bhakti and go back home, back to Krishna. Okay, so that is one thing. Okay, similarly, mirror covered by dust. Okay, mirror covered by dust is kind of a deep lust. Okay, one level above very deep lust. Okay, but still the consciousness is very very low in this case of the living entity. Okay, and they won't be able to perform bhakti. And examples are the animals and birds. Okay, animals and birds are also, I mean, you cannot expect a dog to come and sit in a satsang like this and listen very carefully, try to follow the rules and regulations which are there in the Bhagavad Gita, and then practice bhakti, break the cycle of birth and death, go back home, back to Sri Krishna. No, it's not possible for the animals. Animals do not have that consciousness, neither they have that intelligence, okay, to practice anything which is spiritual in nature. Okay, so this is the example of deep lust. So very deep lust we saw trees and plants, deep lust animals and birds. Okay, now coming to the shallow lust, fire covered by smoke is something which is very very important for all of us. Okay, so even though the fire is covered, we saw that, okay, it is able to perform its function, and people around can also see, or perceive the fire. Okay, that's what I said some moments earlier. Okay, and this fire covered by smoke is nothing but the human form of life. Okay, that the human form of life, a living entity, is covered by shallow lust. Why? Because in the human form of life, we are blessed with that kind of consciousness and that kind of intelligence, okay, where we can perform bhakti, where we can ask the right questions. Okay, that who are we, what is the purpose of life, who is God, what is my relationship with God, how can I break this cycle of birth and death, how can I be eternally happy, how can I stop growing old, why do I have to fall sick, why can't I attain a body which will never fall sick, all these things. So these are the questions which actually liberate a person. Okay, it's the beginning point, starting point of self realization, and once you start trying to find the answers to these questions, that means you are already walking on the path of spirituality. Okay, so all these things can be done only in the human form of life. As I said earlier, an animal or a bird, it's not expected of them to perform bhakti, or a tree cannot perform a bhakti, right? But in human life we are able to do that. Okay, so this particular shloka clearly tells us that how important the human life is. Okay, and how fortunate we are to have taken birth with this human body. Okay, and anyone who realizes this is a very very fortunate person, who realizes this, who is actually making a deliberate attempt to walk on the path of spirituality, to practice some amount of self realization. Such people are very very fortunate. And those people who doesn't understand the importance of this human form of life, such people are really really unfortunate. Okay, we can only pray for them, but it's up to Krishna. Okay, that what will happen of such people. Okay, they are simply wasting their precious chance to go back home, and they will have to traverse again in the 84 lakh species of life. Okay, because depending upon your karma, it is not even sure that in the next life whether we'll be getting a body of a human or not. Human life is very very rare, very rare. Yes, so it may take several lifetimes, several millions of lifetimes also. Okay, to get a human life once again. So those who are watching this video, those who are listening to this lecture, you, first of all, you are very fortunate that you have survived this far in this lecture. Okay, that means some amount of spirituality or spiritual spark is still there inside you. Okay, But if you are listening, then please understand that practicing spirituality in some form or the other is very important. At least it will ensure that you will get a human birth in the next life. Okay, and that will be another chance for you to practice it further and then progress further on, right? But simply by ignoring and living whimsically, it's only going to degrade us to the lower forms of life, to the lower species of life. And when will we get human birth after that? It's something which is very, very difficult to answer. Okay, so this is what it was all about, the description about lust. We'll try to read a little bit from the purport what Srila Prabhupada is saying. He's saying something very nice over here. So just let me turn to that page. By careful handling of smoke in the fire, one can make fire to make fire can made to blaze. Therefore, the human form of life is a chance for a living entity to escape the entanglement of the material existence. In the human form of life, one can conquer the enemy lust by cultivation of Krishna consciousness under able guidance. Yes. So, able guidance is very, very important here. Okay, you cannot walk the path of spirituality or self-realization all by yourself. Okay, it has to be uh, explained to you by a person who is already walking on that path and who is also coming in a disciplic succession. Okay, proper guru sishya parampara, that person is coming in a bona fide sampradaya. Okay, and such a person can guide you. By ourselves we won't be able to do this. Okay, spirituality is way too complex for fallen conditioned souls like Kali Yuga to comprehend. Okay, so only those people who have seen the absolute truth, who have the understanding of this absolute knowledge, can impart that knowledge to us. Okay, so it has to come down a guru shishya parampara, and a bona fide spiritual master can guide it. Okay, so able guidance is very, very important. It's mandatory. It's not a question of choice actually. Okay, so that's one thing that we can take away from here. Okay, second thing, that we need to dovetail our lust in the service of Sri Krishna by practicing devotional service. Okay, and how we have seen that, how can we dovetail lust in the service of Sri Krishna? That instead of thinking to gratify our own senses, we must always think that how can we use all the resources which are at our disposal to gratify the senses of Sri Krishna. Okay, how we can use all these things in the service of Krishna. Okay, what should I do so that Sri Krishna is pleased? Okay, that should be our mood. Okay, so by thinking and acting in this way, we will revive the Krishna consciousness which is dormant within our hearts. It is in the heart of each and every living entity. Every living entity has Krishna consciousness within them. Okay, it's just a question of reviving it. Okay, as it is said in the purport, by careful handling of the smoke in the fire, fire can be made to blaze. Yes, so that's, so this Krishna consciousness is like fire. So just by careful handling, trying to fight away the lust or trying to dovetail the lust in the service of Sri Krishna, we can become very nicely, we can become Krishna conscious and we can go back home. We can break the cycle of birth and death and go back home, back to Sri Krishna. Okay, and these things only humans can do, mind you. Animals and plants do not have this capability, they do not have the consciousness, they do not have the intelligence. Okay, so we must all realize that how fortunate we are to have this human form of life, and it is meant for only self realization and nothing else. Okay, anything that we are doing, apart from devotional service, apart from bhakti, is we are simply beating about the bush. We are just wasting our time. Okay, whether it's your job, whether it's family, whether it's entertainment, whether it's whatever you can think of. Okay, that is not the ultimate goal of life. Okay, some people may say that, okay, I'm taking care of my family very nicely and I'm an honest man, so why should I suffer, right? But no, sir, you are utterly mistaken. The goal of this human life is to practice bhakti. वो तो आपका टारगेट ही नहीं था कभी. Your target was something else, and you are aiming at something else and thinking that you are a very nice shooter, right? That is the scenario. Okay, so this is what Srila Prabhupada is conveying in this particular verse. uh, we will move on to the next one, verse number 39. Okay, So in this particular verse, Sri Krishna will speak more about the lust. It will give us some more information, and let's see what he is saying. I'll just share my screen, and we will read the verse, and then we will see a few keywords, and then we'll discuss the. I'll also read the purport. Purport is very small and it's very, very important also. Okay, so this is verse number 38. I'll go to 39. Yeah. Verse number 39 goes like this. Avritam jnanam jnanino nitya kamarupena kaunteya dushpurena nalena cha. Once again. Avritam jnanametena jnanino nitya kamarupena kaunteya dushpurena nalena cha. Meaning, or the translation, thus the wise living entity Thus, the wise living entity's pure consciousness becomes covered by his eternal enemy in the form of lust, which is never satisfied and which burns like fire. So, living entity is very, spiritual. I mean, it's a part and parcel of Sri Krishna. Okay, Krishna is Sachidanand Vigraha, so by nature it is also like that. Okay, Satchit and Anand. Okay, but then because as soon as it enters the material world, it is just covered by a thick layer of lust around it. Okay, which is a form of eternal enemy. That's what Srila Prabhupada is describing. That's what Sri Krishna is saying in this particular verse. Okay, and he's also saying that this lust is never satisfied. It burns like a fire. So we'll try to see the purport. Okay, purport is also very important here. It is said in the Manusmriti that lust cannot be satisfied by any amount of sense enjoyment, just as fire is never extinguished by continuous supply of fuel. In the material world, the center of all activities is sex, and thus this material world is called Maithuna Agar, or the shackles of sex life. In the ordinary prison house, criminals are kept within the bars. Similarly, criminals who are disobedient to the laws of the Lord are shackled by sex life. Advancement of material civilization on the basis of sense gratification means increasing the duration of material existence of a living entity. Therefore, this lust is a symbol of ignorance by which a living entity is kept in the material world. While one enjoys sense gratification, it may be that there is some feeling of happiness, but actually, that so called feeling of happiness is ultimately the enemy of the sense enjoyer. Yes. So later on, in the Bhagavad Gita, we'll see that whenever a sense object and our senses they combine, okay, momentarily we may feel very happiness, okay, some joy we will feel, but it is actually it's always a cause of a distress. In the long run, it will always, definitely, for sure, it will cause distress. I'm not saying it, Lord Sri Krishna is saying it. So if anyone has any problems with this statement, they can go to Sri Krishna and ask, that why did he make this statement. But yeah, we will try to discuss, once we reach that verse, we will see in detail, okay, why Sri Krishna is saying that. Okay, so yes, very important verse this is, and we have already read the entire purport. So we'll first try to see some of the keywords which are there in the shloka. Okay, first one is avrita, avritam. Okay, means it is covered. Okay, and Jnanina means Krishna is talking about knowers. Avritam jnanametena jnanino. Okay, this is what Krishna is saying. That means Jnanina, the knowers or the intelligent people. Okay, what is happening to them? Avritam, covered. They are covered by what? What is covered? Pure Jnaninam, that is pure consciousness, is being covered. Okay, and by covered by what? Right? Etena, by this. And what is this here? This means kama, kama or lust. Okay, he also gives us more details about the lust by using adjective. Very strong word, adjective Krishna is using. It is called Nitya Vairina. That means it is our eternal enemy. Okay, eternal enemy. Okay, and this eternal enemy manifests in form of what? Kama Rupena. That means it manifests in the form of lust. So lust is our eternal enemy. Okay. So there are so many gyanis, okay, like so-called intelligent folks or intelligentsia, okay, who say that you just go on fulfilling your desires to your heart's content, and then at some point of time you will become peaceful, you will be fully satisfied, okay, and then you will become very calm and peaceful from within also, okay. And when you become calm and peaceful from within, you become self-realized. Simple. Isn't it? But give me one example of a person who has become self-realized by fulfilling their, desires, lusty desires. There is, it's just not possible, right? I mean, this is a very foolish statement of, okay, people, if who are making such statements, okay. Somehow people actually fail to understand the strength of the lusty desires, okay. So there's a reason why Krishna is using this adjective for it, right? He's saying Nitya Varina, okay. Nitya Varina means it is eternal enemy. Since time immemorial, it has been, causing problems for a living entity, okay. So it is the eternal enemy of the living entity, okay. So now that we know that we are dealing with such a strong enemy, okay, it is always very intelligent to do some homework around it, okay, to know that whom we are up against, okay, what are the qualities of this enemy, okay. So all this idea we should be having, so that we can properly strategize that how to counter this. Yes. So we have to understand, we have seen this in verse number 37 also. I would like to repeat again, okay, that we have to understand how, if you want to understand that how strong the lust is, okay, so you can just imagine like this, okay. Lust, if it is not satisfied, okay, in verse number 37 Krishna is saying this, okay, lust, if it is not satisfying, it gives rise to anger, okay. And if you satisfy the lust, it will give rise to greed. That means you will become even more greedy, even more lusty, okay, to perform that same activity over and over again, okay. You will never be satisfied basically, okay. So this is how strong the lust is, okay. And now I hope all of you understand that what we are up against, okay. So those who say that fulfilling your just by fulfilling your desires you can overcome lust, you can become peaceful from within, I'm sorry to say such people are having very poor fund of knowledge, okay. Satisfying lust will only make us more greedy, okay. It will compel us to do more and more sense gratification, and thereby you will be completely forgetting Krishna. It will be taking you away from Krishna, you know so and once we are forgetting Krishna, once we are turning away from Krishna, that means we will be bound to this material life, okay. Again, this cycle of birth and death will continue, okay. Sometimes in human form, sometimes in the form of an animal, an insect, sometimes as demigods, sometimes as demons, but these things will go, this cycle will go on happening, okay. So while doing sense gratification, there is no chance of remembering Krishna, no chance of thinking about Sri Krishna. Okay, and therefore, Srila Prabhupada mentions that satisfying lusty desires, what he's saying in the purport is just like trying to extinguish fire by a constant supply of fuel, trying to extinguish fire with petrol. Is it ever possible? इतना पेट्रोल डालेंगे कि आग बुझ जाएगा. It's not possible, right? Fire will become even more intense. It will burn with even more higher intensity, right? So therefore, Sri Krishna is comparing this lust to analena. Analena, that means fire. Anal means fire. So analena. Okay, this Sanskrit term he's using here. Okay. Another point which Srila Prabhupada is making, that he is calling this material world as Maithuna Agara. Okay. Maithun Agara means shackles of sex life. Okay. So the topmost pleasure in this material world is the sensual pleasure. I mean, everyone should agree to that. Yes. And our pleasure is derived from sex between opposite genders. So we see that all the living entities across the species, okay, they are engaged in sexual activity. Okay, and that is also the need of a living entity. Why? Because that's a way to reproduce, that's a way to procreate. Okay. But then we have to understand that if sex pleasure or sensual pleasure is unrestricted, okay, then it pulls down the living entity and shackles them completely in this material world. Okay, there is no chance of escape after that. Okay, so if someone asks a question, okay, that what is one thing, okay, which keeps the living entity in this material world forever? Answer is sex. Okay, and therefore it is very important to understand that one cannot go on enjoying sex life in an unrestricted way. Okay, there has to be certain restrictions, there has to be certain rules and regulations, otherwise it's very, very dangerous. It will be, you know like it will completely shackle that living entity down. It always keep them in this material world. There's no hope for such a living entity. Okay, therefore our shastras are very clear on this. Okay, that sex should be done only for the uh, procreation. Okay, only to beget Krishna conscious children. Okay, and that too within the jurisdiction of marriage. Okay, there is no question of premarital or extramarital sex life. Okay, it's very, very dangerous, it's very, very sinful. Okay, so such people, or who indulge in these kind of activities, they have to suffer for a very, very, very long time in hellish planetary systems, and the kind of sufferings that they have to go through is simply unimaginable. Okay, so please be aware. Okay, please do not indulge in any of such activities. In case you have already done this, please stop it right there. Okay, go to Sri Krishna, take the shelter of the lotus feet of Sri Krishna and beg for forgiveness. Okay, Krishna is very kind, very merciful. If you are serious about it, if you know just stop it, and make it a point that you will never do it again, then it's there is some hope for such people. Otherwise it's very, very dangerous. Okay, so we must understand very clearly that anything, okay, which is done against shastric injunctions is a sin, and a person doing such an activity will have to suffer for it. There are no exceptions. Okay, so the laws of material nature, I always say, okay, they are very, very stringent. If you put your hand in fire, the fire burns the hand. Fire doesn't see that this hand is of a man, this hand is of a woman, or this hand is of a 2-year-old kid. Okay, fire will not think that, okay, this is just a 2-year-old kid, doesn't know about fire. He has no idea, he or she doesn't have any idea about fire. They don't know that fire burns, so let me just not burn his hand. Okay, fire doesn't think like that. Anything which is there, fire will burn. That is the nature of the fire. This is how absolute the laws of material nature are. Okay, we have to understand that. So if we think that, okay, by performing these sinful activities, somehow or the other we will be getting away from it, uh, there is no escape. Okay, trust me, there is no escape, and there are no exceptions. Okay, so in jail we are put behind bars. Okay, if the criminal is there, we are put behind bars. There is a big log, jail keepers are all around. Criminals can't escape. Okay, same is the case with the living entity. Okay, we are also criminals because we offended our Lord Sri Krishna. Okay, we wanted to enjoy separately from him. Okay, we said that, okay, Krishna, we don't want you in our lives. That is why we were sent to this material world, and this material world is jail. Okay, it's a place of suffering. Krishna himself has confirmed this in the Bhagavad Gita. He is calling this place a Dukhalayam. Okay, where there is only suffering. Okay, so we are suffering here basically. But the question is that, just like in ordinary prison house, there is a bar. We are put behind bars. There are shackles, on the prisoners. We don't see any shackles on ourselves. We don't see any bars or any area of confinement. Okay, so neither there are any guards around us. So what is it which is keeping us here? Okay, why can't we just escape? What is it which is keeping us here from escaping? Okay, prevents us from escaping this material world? And the answer is sex. Okay, material world is also called Mathunagar, which is the shackles of sex life. Okay, so this is an invisible shackle, which is actually binding us to this material world. Okay, and this sex is holding a person in this material world. Yeah. Okay, and these lusty desires, they don't go away with old age. Okay, it's a gross misconception in the society that a person becomes spiritual, or at least spiritually inclined, as they grow old. Okay, this is a gross misconception, and we have seen so many nonsensical cases. Okay, where which has proved beyond doubt that age has nothing to do with the lust. uh, okay, so age has nothing to do with the lust. Okay. Okay, so now that we understand that lust is our biggest enemy, Nitya Varina, okay, then it is very important to understand that where does this enemy reside? Okay, So we have seen who is our enemy, we have seen what are the qualities of this enemy, we have seen what are the degrees of lust that are there. Okay, so we know how dangerous it is. If you satisfy the lust, you will become greedy. If you don't satisfy, you will become angry. And anger is the all devouring enemy of this entire world. Okay, so we know how dangerous it is. So now we need some more information about it. Okay, where does it reside? Kahan rehta hai? Okay, so then and only then we can strategize to kill this enemy. Okay, so this question, we will see in the next verse. Krishna will tell us where the lust actually resides, or at what places the lust resides. Okay, so in the next lecture we will see an answer to this question. So please join us again next week. And if there are any questions, so please feel free to put them in the description box, in the chat box below. Okay, in the chat box below, I'll try to go through them. I'll read them. If possible, I'll try to answer them also. And if I feel that the question is very generic one, that means it can be in the minds of a lot of people, then I would also create a video out of it. This was one thing. Second thing is that if those people who want a more personalized interaction, okay, so for them we also have a WhatsApp group. Okay, the link of that WhatsApp group is given in the description box below. Okay, so those who are interested, they can join. So in the WhatsApp group, like, we have a closed confined group of devotees basically. So whenever you ask any questions, I'm also a part of that group, so I'll try to answer that. Okay, and in this way we can have a more personalized interactions. Okay, so in an online session like this, it's not possible to have one-on-one, or kind of a personalized interaction. Okay, so please, those who are interested, they can feel free to click on the link and join the WhatsApp group. And yes, and in the next class we will read verse number 40 and possibly 41 also. I'll try my best to cover two verses in the next class. Okay, so that's all for today. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.